Hello everybody, Kirby fan here, ready to deliver the goods with another copy ability spotlight. This is our 10th copy ability, hitting that big double-digit milestone, which is super cool. As always, I'd love for you to vote for which ability you'd like to see in the comments. You're free to vote until December 8th, 2020, so if you're seeing this video after then, you can still vote, but it won't count. So instead, you can tell me what you think about Needle. If you like it, you don't like it, if it was better or worse than you thought it would be once the video is over, the good stuff. Speaking of good stuff, that subscribe button right there, ringing the notification bell, pretty good. Helps me with channel statistics, and it helps you find out as soon as I put out new videos, so it is a win-win. Now, that said, look sharp everybody, we are covering Needle today. Needle's been around for a very long time, debuting with the original batch of abilities in Kirby's Adventure. While some abilities have definitely had it worse, looking at you, Light, Needle's definitely been an ability that's gone rather under the radar in terms of popularity. When you think of classic copy abilities, Sword, Beam, Fire, Parasol, Ice, Cutter, Spark, the works, Needle doesn't often come to mind. Is this because it's an underrated ability, or is Needle's history not very good? Time for the next cutting-edge spotlight on Needle. I've only been making these spotlights for a little over a year now, but I've speedran for a lot longer, and let me tell you, the chokehold that Tornado has over Kirby's Adventure is still something to behold. Not because it's the only ability that's used, because it isn't, but just because of how perfect it is for this game specifically. I have a spotlight on Tornado that you can check out if you want to know more, but what this means is that most other abilities simply can't hold a candle to what Tornado can do. That makes it really hard for Needle to find a place in Kirby's Adventure speedrunning. But, of course, Needle isn't really focused on movement, it's more of an up-close, stealing damage kind of ability, and because Needle's form around Kirby, it would be much better for poking enemies and bosses. These Needle puns are just coming too naturally for me not to include. Sorry, not sorry. Moving on. For speedrunning, it's entirely outclassed by both Ball and Hammer. The former combines insanely high damage and mobility with a remarkable amount of invincibility, something that most abilities in Kirby's Adventure just wish that they had. Hammer, meanwhile, simply does the most damage the fastest, but even then, it's generally outclassed by Ball, and, of course, even Tornado most of the time. If Hammer struggles, then Needle is gonna have it rough. Fortunately, the remake, Nightmare in Dreamland, made Tornado basically obsolete for speedrunning, which for Needle is a good start. Unfortunately, the good start ends there. A lot of the damage-dealing abilities got buffed, including Ball and High Jump, range, damage, the works. Needle deals exactly half the damage that Ball deals, and with Ball keeping all of its KA perks on all fronts, except ease of use, it's outclassed by Ball in every way. But ease of use is pretty important, right? Speedrunning is a lot more than just world records. If you want a more lax game to run, or you're just looking to get some PBs, you might not want to learn Ball. Unfortunately, there are still easier to use abilities that help more than Needle. High Jump I already mentioned, and while fairly technical, you can still get more damage out of it the easy way than you could with Needle. Freeze deals less damage, but has the benefit of creating the ice blocks, which deal more damage. Spark and Soar deal just way more damage, enough said, and something like Parasol, an ability that's not very good, beats it out due to the added range and the drift it gets in the air, which helps with movement. And if we're being real for a second, Parasol deals exactly 1 point of damage less than Needle. It's hardly worth freaking out over. My point is, starting out, it's not a good look for Needle. But that's okay, because surely things would get better in Dreamland too, right? It seems like a perfect recipe for success. Its competition is gone, it has animal friend combinations to help with its weaknesses, and for Kirby, Needle's safer attributes might help it out. Did it work out that way? No, it didn't. First things first, only one ability matters for Kirby, and that's Burning. It's safe, spammable, and shoots Kirby forward quickly. That said, most of the game is played with Ku, so the best abilities would be the ones that Ku excels with. And for this game, the only one that really matters for speedrunning is Cutter, since that patches up Ku's only slight weakness, that being his damage. There are some other useful combinations for Ku, but they don't fit the bill quite as well as Cutter does. And even ignoring Cutter, Needle plus Ku, it's just not very good. Rick is never used at all, so we could just ignore him. The shining hope here is Needle plus Kine, seeing as Kine does get used a respectable amount in the game. Fire plus Kine has it beat for sure as an offensive ability, with it being a powerful, spammable projectile, but for a close range attack that you can just hold and be safe, sounds promising, but your movement is hindered, and even if it wasn't, Kine plus Ice exists, which is strictly Kine plus Needle, except better in every way. Leaving ice blocks is a big perk, but the big one? Underwater, that combination is to be feared. Sad to say, but once again, Needle was very underwhelming in Dreamland 2. Copy abilities, sure do exist in Kirby's Block Ball. Needle isn't available until World 7, not giving it much time to be useful before Burning is introduced in World 8. Granted, it does have its uses, and it absolutely saves time even at the highest level of Kirby's Block Ball. I just said that. So by no means is it worthless, but very outclassed. Spark and Stone are better, and Burning is much better. While there are many differences between speedrunning Dreamland 2 and Dreamland 3, the new animal friends don't provide much in terms of clearing the game efficiently. Ku and Kine are still all you really need, minus a little bit of Choo Choo towards the end, and Kirby's bits of usefulness in Dreamland 2 kinda also died out for the most part. What this means is that you really only see Ku and Kine, and with that, Kine only sees action in World 2, with a plethora of combinations that are better than Needle plus Kine, most notable being Kine plus Spark and Kine plus Stone. There is, however, a glimmer of hope for Ku, as the powerful Ku plus Cutter combo was heavily nerfed going into Dreamland 3, only sending out one projectile instead of the 3. Since mobility isn't an issue for Ku, Needle's got a chance again. Problem is, so does every other ability, and what many of them bring to the table are simply more useful, easiest to explain being Ku plus Cleaning of all things, due to how insanely high its damage output is. Abilities such as Ku plus Burning and Ku plus Stone may sound redundant at first since they focus on mobility, but Burning gives Ku a quick burst option of sorts that takes out enemies in small confined areas, whereas Ku plus Stone gets Ku down to the ground quicker than flying down, which is helpful in many instances in Dreamland 3. Even Ku plus Ice, rare as it is, functions as a pseudo-replacement for Ku plus Cutter from Dreamland 2, making auto-scrolling segments easier to deal with. Needle, once again, simply can't cut it. But going into Kirby 64, the animal friends were removed altogether, and Needle could now combine with other abilities. With Burning being among the best abilities in the other two Dreamland games, maybe combining with that one can be useful? Oh, it's one of the worst combinations in the game. But this could still be Needle's chance. For moving through levels, Burning plus Burning is essentially the only combination that matters, so maybe Needle combined with something else could finally prove useful for boss fights? Unfortunately, it still didn't work out like that. Bomb, Spark, and of course Burning tend to be the best abilities for dealing with bosses. And sure, sometimes you get another ability mixed in, Fire plus Cutter, Spark plus Cutter, Spark plus Stone, and these all have their uses, but Needle is, say it with me now, outclassed. The one combination worth mentioning for Needle is Needle plus Stone, which grants you the Drill, which becomes a projectile at the end. This is very good for hitting specific targets from a distance, since you can repeatedly use it in the air and on the ground. It still doesn't see much use in the speedrun because, you know, it's outclassed. But it's something, at least. Once again, Needle could hope for something good come Kirby's Return to Dreamland, because combinations are just entirely gone, and just about every ability received new moves, including Needle. And there's the standard, of course, but it also got a big attack that hits above Kirby, a projectile of sorts when you're using the standard attack, even got a dash attack too. So it didn't get much, but surely this would give it some use, right? Yeah, I hope you know where this is going by this point, but unfortunately, the difference this time is that this isn't simply Needle being outclassed anymore. For any kind of speedrunning, it just doesn't compare to other abilities anymore. Wing is absurdly powerful in this game, but even focusing on the more ground-based movement abilities, there's plenty better. Cutter, Fire, Parasol, Water, Tornado, they all have far better movement on the ground, and in terms of damage, they're better too. Needle is very weak. I'm not even comparing it to the heavy hitters like Ninja and Hammer either. It's just none of its attacks hit particularly hard. The only advantage that it has going for it, if you use an attack as Kirby moves off of the ledge, Kirby won't lose his momentum from the dash attack. Kirby's pretty safe when doing this too, considering Needle's standard attack protects Kirby's entire body. This is certainly cool looking and, while theoretically useful, it requires a ledge and is still generally inferior to the more consistent abilities that I mentioned earlier. As for the boss rushes, yikes, it's not a good look. It still isn't the worst ability in the game for either mode, which is a perk, but it's pretty low on the speed list. Again, it just doesn't deal a lot of damage. Some of the classic abilities got away much better, but here we are, Needle is not one of those. Just over 9 minutes might sound impressive, but considering that 8 minutes is considered average, sorry Needle, better luck next time. Oh, next time is triple deluxe, huh? Well, sorry Needle, but literally nothing has changed for you. Still outclassed, still too small of a moveset, etc. It's not fast, it's not good. It's been a long, tough road for Needle over the years, but don't let that fool you into thinking it's always been bad. Of all the abilities we've covered so far, it's one of the most unfortunate ones due to almost always having legitimately good traits, but simply always being outclassed. But this doesn't mean that it's always stuck in a rut. Let's get to the games we haven't covered yet and see what else Needle has to offer. Needle serves a different purpose in Kirby's Dream Course. While you're moving, Needle will stop you from moving no matter your speed. It's important to differentiate it from Stone, with the major difference being that Stone won't stop moving if you're on a slant. Needle, no matter what, will stop you. Neither of these are very useful for getting hole-in-ones, since you need to move around and not stop until you're in the hole. Yeah, I know we're talking about the positives now. We're getting to that, don't worry. For the speedrun, Needle fulfills some very important roles. The biggest difference is that, for hole-in-ones, the fanfare that plays when you get a hole-in-one feels satisfying and rewarding. For speedrunning, you don't want to see that. It wastes so much time. If you have Needle, though, you can effectively get a hole-in-one and simply stop right in front of the hole, or close to an enemy, or something along those lines. It faces competition in this role from Stone, of course, and while that one sees more use, Needle has the perk of not wasting time by sliding down slopes, which is a plus. Needle can also be used with a jump to get a different ability upon landing, but that one's kind of sad for Needle, so we're gonna stop talking about it and pretend it never happened, okay? Okay. Kirby Air Ride gave Needle something it had been hoping for since Dreamland 2. Less abilities that actually helped it out. A whole bunch of things in Air Ride help Needle be a great ability, but the number one that deserves mention is the wheelie scooter. The way that this ability handles speed is, unique, including but not limited to the glitch involving spinning into a wall at a certain angle to gain crazy speed. Building up this amount of speed and using Needle will, in fact, not slow you down. Braking and going faster might sound weird for Kirby Air Ride, but it's something that Needle's got. Needle proves useful in several different Air Ride courses, actually, and all for the same reason, even if it isn't combined with the wheelie scooter. The hitbox of the Needles gets very big on braking, allowing Kirby to smack a bunch of enemies while charging, which results in Kirby not slowing down very much during the process. It has an additional perk of still having a hitbox when Kirby isn't charging, too. Basically, while it's much smaller, Kirby can still hurt enemies without having to hold A. The one flaw with Needle in regard to Air Ride courses is, simply put, Sword is better. It kinda lacks the range that Needle has, but it hits everything around it without ever having to slow down. aside from the crazy shenanigans and machine passage, why use Needle when you could just use Sword? Well, that's another perk of being an Air-Ride for Needle. Unlike regular Kirby games, you can't just pick and choose your abilities whenever. This is a racing game, and whatever's available to you is what you have to use, and Needle's around in plenty of areas where Sword simply isn't. This isn't an issue with Top Ride because Needle doesn't exist in Top Ride, but abilities don't exist there either. Oops. Where this isn't an issue for Sword is in City Trial, where abilities are either found on the randomizer or in the red boxes. Events such as Destruction Derby favor both, while they're both outclassed in others, such as Kirby Melee, hi Plasma, but there is an event where one ability has a clear advantage over the other. And for once, Needle is on the winning side. The genuine strategy for the Versus Day-to-Day Stadium event, which, mind you, people use sometimes for City Trial 100 checklist runs, is to just keep resetting until Needle shows up and spam it to beat Day-to-Day. It's simply that strong, and while it would have been nice to be this strong in any other game, no matter how you look at it, Needle is one of the best abilities in Kirby Air Ride, no questions asked. Kirby Canvas Curse is always a difficult one for any ability. First of all, if we're talking about clearing the game as fast and efficiently as possible, you reset the game for all but a small handful of levels, meaning that you lose your ability after every level. And even if you didn't, of all things, normal Kirby is by far the most consistent at going quickly due to having a dash. Drawing a circle with your ink and moving Kirby, it keeps the pace going fast enough where abilities are just kind of often redundant. Still, Needle does have some perks over normal Kirby that make it worth using. First, if you can keep the ink up, Needle is effectively the fastest ability in the game. Compared to other quick abilities like Stone and Burning, they only excel in certain directions. Stone going down, Burning going horizontal, etc. But Needle, as long as you have the ink, goes insanely fast in any direction. But of course, that's the big drawback. You need ink. Without ink, Needle will still move, but compared to other abilities and normal Kirby, it's much, much slower. This means that Needle is excellent in smaller rooms, but very bad in large, wide open areas. While it's certainly good, it's very inconsistent, which is not usually what you look for in efficiency. Still, the fact that it's in a game with Burning and can be a strictly better option is a big step up for Needle. It's a small niche that it has, but a very important one. And to finish things off, to my legitimate surprise, Needle in the Triple Deluxe boss rushes is actually very good. There are some boss fights it really struggles with, but to make up for that, there are some boss fights here that Needle tears apart. While it never quite reaches top tier status against any of them, it has some very respectable times. And considering that one of the fights that it struggles with is this, that's pretty impressive. So what changed between Return to Dreamland and this? Simply put, Needle's damage output got way better. The downward Needle in particular is really strong and spammable, but they kind of did the same thing to Needle's standard attack too. The projectile can be used so quickly after using the regular attack that, in most cases, it's faster and stronger to just use the standard attack, fire the needles, rinse, repeat. The strength of this combined with the range and impressive power from the downward strike makes it a great pick for some bosses. Again, and I want to stress this, it isn't a great pick for the boss rushes in general, simply because it's inconsistent. Its overall time in both boss rush modes is simply average. But the bosses that it does do well against, it does really well against. And considering that this is the last time that Needle has appeared in any capacity in a Kirby game, I'm glad that we could go out on a high note. And with that, we've wrapped up another Spotlight. With everything said, how did Needle do over the years? I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it was pretty underwhelming, but at least it offered something in most of the games that made it stand out. It was almost always outclassed, but with a few exceptions, it was still pretty decent. And one of those exceptions, Kirby Air Ride, it's in contention for the best ability in the whole game. Needle is far from the most popular or abusable ability, but it's had a notable history over the years, and it absolutely deserves to be in another game. Considering it's been around since day one, it is long overdue to come back.